All right, everyone. Next interview is about to begin. I am here with Dr. Carrie Lane, who just published More Than Pretty Boxes: How the Rise of Professional Organizing Shows Us the Way We Work Isn't Working. Dr. Lane, can you start by introducing yourself and your fields of study?
Sure. And actually, the book comes out in 2 days, so we're even early on it. It hasn't even just come out. So my name's Carrie Lane. I'm a professor in the Department of American Studies, and my background is a combination of cultural anthropology, women and gender studies, and American studies.
And your book is about professional organizers. Can you tell the audience about this profession?
Sure. When I first said I was researching professional organizers, all the academics I know assumed I meant labor unions. And so maybe you were thinking the same thing, but they're not. It's not that kind of organizer. It's the kind of organizer like on Hoarders or The Home Edit, Marie Kondo, the kind who come organize your closet or your home office. That's the sort of organizers that I study.
And what motivated you to write about said organizers?
So I'm a pretty organized person. I wasn't always, I'm not sure how it happened, but I became organized in my adulthood. And one day I was cleaning out a cabinet and just pulling out some mugs that I was going to donate to Goodwill, because I don't know, we all have too many mugs, right? So I pulled a few down and I just felt so virtuous, right? I was like, my life was better. I'm a better person. Look how organized it is, and I'm donating it. And I just, as a cultural critic, I had to catch myself like, that sounds like BS to me, right? It's like 3 mugs. It doesn't make a concrete difference in my life. So I realized like there's something going on around the cultural ideal of decluttering and simple living and minimalism that's obviously tied into bigger emotional and cultural stuff. And so that's when I decided I wanted to study the idea of simplicity, of organizing, and the sort of the world that takes a part of. Someone's called it the containo-industrial complex, which refers to like professional organizing, Real Simple magazine, storage units, container store, things like that.
And how did you study that? What was your method?
So I'm an anthropologist, and so the core part of what I did was to do long-term field work among professional organizers. So I did interviews with more than 50 organizers in LA, Orange County, and other cities around the country, New York, San Francisco, St. Louis, Chicago, DC. And then I also did participant observation. So basically I went to professional events for organizers. I went to organizing lectures, and I worked more than 100 hours as an unpaid assistant to professional organizers. So I learned what it was actually like to be an organizer on the job. And then American Studies is interdisciplinary. So I also did some analysis of popular culture. So watching a lot of these organizing reality shows, organizing related books and podcasts, websites, things like that. And then I also had some wonderful graduate student assistants who helped me search through American media and find the earliest references to organizing as a career or a professional organizer as a particular kind of professional, which, spoiler alert, was the late 1970s.
Yeah, I found this fascinating. Like, you were volunteering as a professional organizer. I always say I'm a closet anthropologist, but I never had the courage to be an actual anthropologist. So I found that part so cool. So for those of you who are going to read this book, what you'll find is in between Carrie Lane's chapters, she has a story. And you are a phenomenal writer. I will say, like, I was like sitting there having tea at the table. It was really, you really drew the reader in. Will you kind of regale us with one of those stories and tell us what sense you made out of it?
Sure. Oh, it's hard to pick one. So those are actually my favorite part of the book. I have a little sister who is like phenomenally detail oriented, and so she proofread my entire book for me. And anybody who's ever written anything to publish it will understand what I mean when I say that my sister, who's not an academic, right? She made notes like, in the footnote on page 121, you repeat a sentence from chapter 1. right? Like that's the kind of stuff she found, right? So she actually said, I wish the book was just the organizing stories, like just the in-between chapters. She's like, I don't care about the academic stuff. She just likes the stories. And they're kind of my favorite part too. So I call them organizing stories. But they're really just narratives of individual jobs that I did with professional organizers that give you a sense of what the organizing process looks like. So the one I opened the book with, I'll talk about that one, which I had a wonderful illustrator. You can't see, you're too far away, but there's a wonderful illustrator named Charlotte Corden, and she made tiny little line drawings for each of the organizing stories. So it's a picture of the item in question in the story that's being organized. So this one has a little picture of an empty picture frame above the top of the story. So this job, I met a professional organizer. She's been in this field more than 20 years now, very well known, has books of her own. And I worked with her. It was in LA. I think it was, I can't remember where I say it is because I make this stuff up to protect people's identities. But it was a woman's condo, and she wanted to start a new business from home. She had retired for medical reasons from her previous career. She had a home office she wanted to get set up. So the first thing an organizer does on a job is they figure out where it hurts, which means like what disorganization or clutter is really bothering the person. So as soon as we walk into this apartment, I see that there are bags everywhere. Shopping bags with items that still have tags on them in there, bags full of other bags, bags of garbage also, like not like a hoarder's show, but very full. And the kitchen too. You walk into the kitchen and there's a lot of stuff in the kitchen that has nothing to do with kitchens. There's stacks of books, there's bags of picture frames with tags still on them. There's also food and plates and dishes and everything. Now, to me, as an organized person who has I have a pretty low clutter threshold is what we call it. Like I like shit neat. And so for me, that kitchen, I would dive straight into that kitchen and start organizing, right? It did not bother the client one bit. She didn't even mention the kitchen the entire time we were there for 2 days straight. It was the home office. She wanted to make this spare bedroom into a home office. So we walk in there. We later found out there was a window in the room, but you couldn't tell because it was just boxes upon boxes upon boxes. And we start going through the boxes. And this client is super good at paper, and paper is hard, right? One file box full of paper can take you a whole day, whereas an entire garage full of clutter might only take a few hours. It's because, paper's so tiny and it often has to be cared for so specifically. So this client was amazing at paper. She's like a paper ninja, just cutting through. She's sorting through things. She had a great filing system. It had just gotten a little outdated. She had to catch things back up. We're tearing through paper and we think like, we're not even going to be here that long. And then the organizer said, well, let's talk about frames. You have a lot of empty frames around your apartment. So while we're finishing up paper, Carrie, go grab the frames. So I go to the rest of the apartment and I start bringing in frames. And again, these are all empty. They all have tags on them still. I start bringing in the frames and I start to feel really self-conscious about it because I feel like a jerk because there's so many frames. It's like dozens and dozens of frames. There's more than 50 frames. And this apartment, beautifully decorated, had wonderful art and photography all around the walls. The walls were already full of artwork and other things, right? But there are all these frames. So I bring them in and I'm lining them up on the wall. And of course I'm me, so I'm lining them up like by size, by style, by whatever. And so we asked the client, so which ones do you want to get rid of? And of all these dozens and dozens of frames, she picked out 3. One that was like kind of rinky-dink tiny, and the other 2 were broken. And she said, but I'm going to keep the rest. And the organizer said, okay, well, let's think about it this way. Why don't we put the artwork you want next to the frame so we can get them framed and hung on the wall? And she said, okay, well, I have a couple things, but really, this is for art I haven't yet created. I want to bring art back into my life. It's for paintings I haven't done, pieces of art I haven't finished yet. She said, okay, well, where would you hang them? Because your walls are pretty full. She said, oh, no, they're not for me. I'm going to give them to friends. So the organizer's like, okay, I'm going to try from another angle. And she says, okay, well, why don't we take Post-it notes? And for each friend you're going to give one to, put the Post-it note on that frame. Then we'll know which ones are extra that you don't need, right? And the woman said, well, no, that won't work because a lot of these are for friends I haven't met yet, right? And it's funny, right? But it was also this really poignant moment that brought home to me so clearly what organizers had already been telling me, which is it's not about the stuff. It is not about the things. It is the emotions people have around the things, what the things represent to them, the imaginary lives they hope to one day lead, that these things are sort of a talisman of, that I will one day be a person who makes art. I will one day be a person with a huge social network, right? And so giving up these frames is giving up that like imagined person she might be. So that is just one of the stories. Oh, wait till you get to the New Kids on the Block stuff one. That's a really good one too. So, but I won't give that one up. Yeah.
And that actually is the argument that's most stuck with me, I think, as I go about my everyday life. Like, what do our objects say about our future selves? So I'm glad you chose to tell that story. So you describe in your book, you say, the quote is, "I understand organizing as feminist work." What do you mean by this?
So I have to give credit for this argument actually to the second organizer I ever interviewed when I was just doing preliminary research. Her name is Regina Lark. And I mention her name, usually I use pseudonyms for people in my studies, but Regina has actually spoken and published a lot on this topic. So when I cite anything from her published work, I use her real name. And then she's also one of the characters in the book, but you wouldn't know which one. So Regina was my second interview, and she told me that she sees organizing as feminist work because women are told from the moment they are born that they need to change themselves by buying things, buying skincare products, buying these clothes, buying these razors to shave their legs, buying these books to learn how to be sexy, or buying this, buying that, right? And she called it the feminine acquiritron of life. And she said that as an organizer, what she wants to do is to take women off of that acquiritron that just keeps spinning and spinning and tell them, like, you're fine how you are. You don't need to buy anything. And I love Regina because she's also, unlike most organizers, she's a little in your face about it. So the very first time I met her, she was like, I know you're a feminist. Why are you carrying a purse? Why are you hauling around baggage? Men don't carry purses. You could fit all you need in your wallet, in your pocket. And I was like, oh, okay, Regina. Like, if you meet Regina, you'll know. You just want to do what she says. But so she's the one who first mentioned this. And other organizers didn't necessarily describe what they did as feminist, but when you see what they do, you'll see what I mean by feminist, in the sense that, first of all, organizers say the most important thing is not to be well organized yourself. There are a lot of people who are highly organized, like me, who would be terrible organizers. Because to be an organizer, you have to surround yourself with other people's clutter every day. And you never tell people to get rid of something. So sometimes that means at the end of the day, it doesn't look like you would want your home to look, but it's not your home, right? So what you really need is empathy, a lack of judgment, a willingness to listen and to connect to someone. And so what many of the organizers told me was that organizing is actually a helping profession. And you have so many people who are hurting, and their clutter or their overscheduled calendar, their inability to manage their time, that's actually a symptom of other problems in their life. And because it's often women who are in charge of the clutter, of managing the household, or of even managing the clutter at work, as administrative assistants, as office managers, right? Women tend to carry this moral burden that, like, if they're not organized, if their house doesn't look like a magazine layout, then there's something wrong with them. And so organizers actually go in there and say, no, honey, you're fine as you are. It's just a stack of mail. You're not a bad person. Your life is not going to be better necessarily if you sort this. It's just stuff. So let's calm it down. And also to disabuse women of the really unrealistic images they have for themselves, for their homes and spaces, right? So one of the organizers I interviewed, I love that she tells clients, oh yeah, you know that pantry you see on Pinterest, the beautiful one where everything's decanted into matching containers and it's your lentils are rainbow organized, right? She said, I can do that for you, right? But the people who have that have full-time staff that run their homes, right? If the most important thing in your life is to have that pantry, we'll make it work. But if you don't want to commit the time and resources, why don't we pick out a pantry that actually works for the lifestyle you have and the time you have to work on it? And that's where the sort of feminist work of organizing comes in.
What about when organizers start creating professional organizations? Do you find that the organizations they create as a almost exclusively female field is different than male professional organizations?
Yeah, thank you. I love that question. So organizing, they say often that it's 98% women, and I think that's an undercount. Men often joke there's never a line for the men's room at a NAPO conference, and NAPO is the National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals. And one of the things about the professional association that women built for themselves, and this is women in the late 70s and early 80s, all the first organizers are women. A lot of them are centered in LA. The association I just mentioned was founded in 1984 by 5 professional organizing women in LA, and I got to interview 4 of those 5. One of them has since passed away. But so I got to hear the story of like the very first days that organizers came together in a meeting. And one of them said the first time she met another professional organizer, she thought she was the only one. She wasn't even calling it professional organizing. She called herself a freelance secretary, I think was what she called herself. And she was at her singing group and she met another organizer and she said, I said what I did and she said what she did, and we didn't know whether to hug or slap each other. But so when organizers got together, they said from the beginning, like, we are going to be collaborative competitors, because ultimately it doesn't matter which one of us gets the job if nobody even knows what organizing is. So they saw it as like, together we are going to take this work that has like 3 strikes against it. Women do it. It often occurs in the home, and it involves serving others. 3, across the board, poorly paid, low status occupations, right? So they said, we need to get people to take us seriously. And they encountered a lot of people, usually men, usually businessmen in different settings, who said, that's not a job, right? You just want to be a housewife. And they said, no, I want to be somebody's housewife, and then I want to go home to my own home and not have to live with them. Like, that, there's something different here. So they really had to fight this uphill battle. And in some ways, I write, they kind of bought into some very male-dominated models of professionalism in a way that was problematic and created some divides among organizers. But in other ways, they really rejected the idea that professionalism has to look a certain way, and they created this very collaborative, I would say, like, ethically upstanding professional association that you can still see the echoes of what those original founders did in the way the organization is run even today.
The other major argument that you make in your book is the way we work isn't working. Can you say a little bit about that?
I mean, I don't think I have to tell you that, right? People are overwhelmed. People are overworked. Work is creeping into all aspects of their lives. We're rarely free from it unless we, intentionally create barriers between the different zones of our life, if that's even possible, depending on your job. And so I argue that, when people talk about why we need organizers, they say, oh, well, Americans buy too much stuff, right? And yes, we do, right? But often that consumerism is a response to other problems. It's a symptom, not a cause, right? It's the extent to which we buy things to substitute for a lack of time, right? I tell like one story, I can't remember if it's in the book. I think it's maybe a footnote, but I have a son who's in elementary school, and the list came out of like the stuff we need to buy for his classroom, which I don't remember those lists from when I was a kid, but it's like 40 items long, right? I'm like, wait, I'm buying a 64 pack of toilet paper for my son's 5th grade classroom. And they had a little link. You could just go to Amazon and click one button. They had assembled a wish list, and you could buy all the products on that list, right? And as like a busy working parent, my initial thought was like, I'll just do that. And then I realized, okay, slow down, Carrie, slow your roll. And I realized I have a lot of those things. He already has crayons. We already have extra dry erase markers. That pack of 5 clipboards, if I only need one, why don't I check in with some girlfriends and we can split one instead of all of us buying a 5-pack of clipboards on Amazon when we all need one, right? Like, if we have the time and the luxury of slowing down, we can actually buy less, right? And so I think consumerism is an easy thing to point to, and it's part of the issue. But I think more, it's that people are overwhelmed. Very few households have a designated homemaker anymore whose full-time job is to organize the stuff, stock the pantry, get the groceries, decant the groceries, recycle the garbage, And then also there's an extra angle there of like I don't want to be one of those people who says like life is harder than it used to be, because life was harder in other ways in the past than it is today. But there's a level of stuff and responsibilities that Americans are expected to manage these days that is new, right? The influx of information via email, via social media, via snail mail. I talk in the book about how when my mom registered me for kindergarten 45 years ago, she had to bring a driver's license and that yellow vaccine booklet that old people like me will remember from our childhoods. And when I had to register my son for kindergarten, it involved downloading 3 different apps. I went to 4 different websites. I had to go to the district office twice. I had to get 4 different forms from his doctor and his allergist to have an EpiPen at school. And I went back and counted when I wrote the book, I had 45 emails from his public school before his first day of kindergarten, right? Like, again, I'm not saying parenting was easy in the past and it's hard now, but there's this level of stuffness that we're overwhelmed by. And so I think organizers are not the solution to the problems of contemporary life, but they are a Band-Aid and an effort to offer some compassion and connection and everyday strategies to help manage this overwhelming stuff.
Last question, and please don't kick me. I know your book hasn't even come out yet, but do you know what's next?
Okay, you can quote me on this. My goal is to not write another book, but I've met myself, and so I know that that's unlikely. So I have this project that I don't want to do, but I do have like an email folder and a paper folder with the name on it of this project. And I don't know if anybody's heard of the FIRE movement. It's the Financial Independence Retire Early. It came out of sort of Silicon Valley, this idea that like you work really hard and do strategic investing and really, really aggressive underconsumption, right? Spending as little as possible, being as, like, what do they call it? Aggressive frugalism or something like that. So you spend very little, you invest very strategically, and you create passive income streams so that you can retire far earlier than is typical, say 35, 40 years old, right? And I think it's a really interesting movement because it sort of questions the place of work in our lives and the idea that you need work to give you an identity. But the thing is, it was mostly young men, especially young single men, who advocate for it. And when you look at the FIRE movement info, a lot of it doesn't apply to women. Like it'll say, here's what you need to do. You need to buy 5 black t-shirts and 5 pairs of jeans and you just wear them every day to work. And so you have like young African-American professional women in corporate America saying, right, that's what I'm gonna do. Or they'll say, just use 1 bar of soap to wash your hair and your body. And women are saying, that's not reasonable for me and my life. It also is a model with no dependents, right? So it says like, you should have a lot of roommates so you don't have to pay a lot of rent. Well, if you have young children, you don't necessarily want a lot of roommates and strangers living in the home with them, right? So there's this way in which it's not very inclusive of women. So a lot of women created the women's FIRE movement, and there are all these cute little jokes about women on fire, fire women, and which I plan to use all of them in whatever my title will be of the book I'm not going to write. But so these women have these offshoots of the FIRE movement, but they too have had problems because they tend to be very white and middle and upper class dominated. And so a lot of working class women say, look, you're making assumptions that I'm not living paycheck to paycheck. Or black women will say, I post on here and I never get a reply. And then I see a white woman post and get 300 replies, right? So there's all these sort of intersecting layers about different groups and their experiences with work, their experiences with finance, their experiences, women say in the mainstream FIRE movement, if they post, they either get mansplained or they get hit on, right? And so they're looking for spaces to learn about finance and to share their wisdom about finance that are free from, these sort of additional problems. So anyway, that's the book I'm not going to write.
I think we're going to see you back here soon. Give a round of applause to Dr. Carrie Lane. Buy her book in a couple of days.
There's a flyer on the American Studies table in the back that has a code for 30% off if you do decide you feel like buying the book.
Yes. And as a thank you for participating, here you go.
It's a little box of my book.
Yeah. Created by our brilliant HSS team, Amelia Gaskell, Sammy Kim. Woo! All right, y'all, I'll see you back here in about 6 minutes for our next interview with Dr. Elise Wong, where we will discuss the making of felony procedure in Middle English literature.